This is episode 39 with Ashley Taylor Yannello.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast. Episode 39 today, and I'm really excited to be speaking to Ashley Taylor Yannello. Now, in case you haven't heard of Ashley, she's a speaker and hostess of a daily podcast where she speaks about being real, raw, and vulnerable. Back in her 20s, Ashley packed up her things and headed for New York with only $1,000 in her pocket. Shortly thereafter, she had all that money stolen, her boyfriend cheated on her, and she lost pretty much everything else. Ashley then had to make the tough decision of moving back home to Chicago, where she began building back up. From being rejected for food stamps to sleeping on a yoga mat, Ashley experienced a lot of failures and learned some pretty hard truths along the way. Yet somehow she still always managed to bounce back and find her feet again. Ashley now believes in tapping into our intuition or our gut feeling and being unapologetically real and raw and vulnerable, which we explore in this episode. Now, in the interview, you're going to learn how Ashley lost everything and bounced back again, the unexpected factor in turning your failures into a lesson, how to let go of relationships that aren't serving you, how to recognize and trust your gut feeling, how to overcome the comparison trap of social media, and the difference between being authentic and oversharing. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/039. But for now, let's go hang out with Ashley. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm speaking to Ashley Taylor Yannello. Ashley, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And we connected through the Facebook group that Amanda put together, which at the time of this recording, that episode would have gone live. I think that would have been episode 30. I'm not going to guess in case I screw it up. But,
I always screw up my numbers too, so you're all good.
Amanda Rivera's Facebook group, which is really awesome. But we connected through there, and you've also got a podcast, which we'll speak about later. But before we get into all that good stuff and some of the things you've experienced, why don't we start right at the beginning and share with the audience and listeners who is Ashley and a bit about your quarter life journey.
Yeah, so I was telling you right before we got into the recording, I mean, my journey has definitely been one for the books. I've started out back in like 2008, 2009. I've been online for a really long time, like prehistoric Facebook, back when there was MySpace and LiveJournal and all that stuff. But I really got into everything in 08, 09. I actually started out with Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which is actually a nutrition health coaching type of school based out in New York. Okay, so you're familiar. That's kind of where I got my start in this whole crazy world that we kind of label as personal dev or entrepreneurship. And from there, I really kind of spent my 20s really doing a lot of ups and downs and a lot of failures, and obviously a lot of lessons that came through everything I've dabbled in. But I always kind of joke that I've had so many deaths and rebirths over the course of my life. It's pretty crazy, really. But to sum it up, I mean, I started with health coaching, went into like confidence coaching, whatever you want to call it, for women, did a huge telesummit that just was like craziness. It was a whole month long. I got 30 different thought leaders together, did that all on my own in 2012, all about confidence in every single area of your life, from building a business to starting a fitness routine or regimen, or just changing your overall life, just to make people feel good overall. And then from there, I kind of jumped into doing a lot of business type stuff because I had built up a social media platform. I knew what I was talking about. I've got the background in terms of, I taught myself everything in terms of HTML, web design, email marketing was kind of my background. Before I got into this whole world, I was at a corporate law firm, and that was kind of when the ding ding went off, like, oh my God, I don't want to be living in a cubicle. This is not my life. And that's when I kind of got into Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And then over the course of those 20s, I definitely invested in some things that did not work out. Obviously, everything taught me a lesson. And right around the end of that point, I actually had a pretty dark night of the soul that I've talked about a lot on different interviews, or people kind of know about it. But for your audience, I basically went to New Jersey without a plan. I was going to New York, but I was staying in New Jersey with my good friend. She was actually subletting her place to me. And that was like that critical point where I ended up losing everything I owned, where basically a girl that I'd met took all my money. It was like a bad apartment kind of thing going wrong. And basically, I was left in New Jersey without a dime to my name, literally did not know what the heck I was going to do. And from there, I basically started doing a lot of virtual assistant work because it was kind of like, okay, let me take all my natural skill set, which is blending everything I had learned in the coaching industry, everything I'd learned over the years in terms of being online or being on social and doing copy editing for different people, kind of harnessed that all together and just started making like $600 here, $600 there, like however I could make the money flow in. And right at that point, I mean, it was literally hand to mouth. And from New Jersey, I was able to kind of get enough support from my tribe or my community, and basically had to come back to Chicago without anything. I literally had 2 suitcases, came back here, got a studio apartment sight unseen, and I was sleeping on a yoga mat, just building my like virtual assistant work. And then that kind of segued off because I kind of got to that point where I don't want to say burnt out, but I kind of got to that point where I'm like, you know what? I'm almost 30. This doesn't feel good, because it got to the point where I couldn't make extra money because it was like you kind of tap out with how many clients you could work with at that time. And then also virtual assistant work for me, I obviously had the skill set, but I realized that I wasn't meant to be a behind the scenes type of gal. So from there, I kind of segued off and I started building my own courses. I have different evergreen courses that are on a whole different website separate from my main website and my podcast. And then in March, end of March this year, was when Real Talk with Ashley was born. And I just saw it as a way to kind of build another platform to kind of put my voice out there and share all the ups and downs and share all the life like tribulations that kind of get tossed around. And basically, what I've discovered after doing a podcast now for 225 episodes, today was 225, and I've watched it grow from like 0 to this last month, I hit 17,000 downloads for podcasting people. And, you know, the thing that really stood out to me was how important it is that we really are authentic. We really are not only ourselves, because that's cliche to say be yourself. It's like, well, who the fuck am I? But really coming to the table as authentically as possible and letting people know you don't have to have all your shit together. You don't have to be perfect or polished, because that's what we always see online. To be a thought leader, you have to have like X amount of money. You have to have this kind of lifestyle. I'm always coming to the table. And even with my Facebook group, I have this whole community called the Rebel Crew, which is literally kind of what I'm all about, which is being super transparent through the journey, sharing the ups and downs, sharing everything, literally doing Facebook Lives in Target, and people go crazy. It's like, it's literally just me coming to the table as Ashley and just being able to connect like that.
I love it. I love it. So I mean, there's so many directions we can go from there. But I want to go back to your mindset when, first of all, when you left Chicago to go to the East Coast, what was going through your mind then? And then returning back to Chicago, basically having lost everything. I know you also said, I think it's on your website, like your boyfriend cheated on you as well, and you had nothing when you went back. So what was your mindset when you left and then having to come back?
Yeah. So when I left, I mean, I'd been in the quote unquote coaching world, or just being amongst a lot of different entrepreneurs and thought leaders and people that were up to big things. I basically was super excited about it because I love New York. Like I want to be back there so bad. And that's kind of what I'm saving and like doing everything possible to get back to the East Coast. I just had a lot of connections over there. And I kind of felt this like strong pull to just try it out. Like if I'm going to go somewhere, if I'm going to take a risk, I might as well do it in my late 20s and just give it a go and see what happens. And at that time and place, basically I'd been in the entrepreneurial world. I'd been in all these different things and learning along the way, making new connections, like I said, that were up to bigger things than my current social circle. And I think this is important for a lot of people just because I basically didn't have any friends. Like all my friends that I had known from college or from high school or from years and years, nobody else kind of was going after the same thing I was going after. Like no one else had the personal dev or like had any interest in like exploring other opportunities of making a legacy or building a brand or building a business. Like everyone was kind of just going about their life. And at that point, I was living in a condo. I had just come out of my relationship, which you just referenced. Like I'd gotten out of this relationship because this guy had cheated on me. And basically I was just like, you know what? Now's the time. I kind of felt like, okay, Chicago and I are kind of over at this point, and I want to go to the East and just give it a go. That's where all my new friends were, like all my online friends, like everyone that I've connected with and all the Skype conversations I had. I just knew in my heart, like if I'm going to do something, I might as well do it now. And I was just super excited. Buying that one-way ticket, I'll never forget it. And Facebook memories always reminds us of when that happens. But it was just like this magical moment. I felt so excited by it. And I always think, because still to this day, I'm so like in the moment, I'm super like connected to my intuition, but I just knew there was a reason for me to go there. And of course, like hindsight, you would never know. You don't go to New York with $1,000 in your pocket without a fucking plan. Like you just don't do that. But at the time, I'm like, I just have to give it a go. And when I got there, it was like, of course, I had all these like ideas of what was going to happen and how amazing it would be. And unfortunately, like turn of events, I basically got off the plane. I remember I left JFK and I pretty much just dove right in. I like put on this event for some girl. She was like an artist or photographer. I did this whole event. And that was actually the one that stole my $1,000 because she ended up, we were going to live together. It was like a weird situation, and I don't want to go down that road or talk negative about anyone, but it was just one of those life lessons that really was valuable. And it was an unfortunate situation, but I never regret it because it did teach me, it taught me a lot of valuable lessons. And it also taught me how important listening to our gut really is, because I got that kind of icky off feeling when I was at that event. And that's kind of what made me say, you know what, probably don't want to live with her. So I ended up just telling my friend in Jersey, I'm like, just let me crash here because I don't know what's going to happen. But then, like I said, I lost all my money. I had nothing to my name. I literally sold all my stuff. I had 2 suitcases, like downsized my entire life at that point. Went there and that happened. And then when I had to come back to Chicago, that was like a very hard moment for me because I'm never one, I always have difficulty asking for help, especially financial help. And at that point, I literally didn't know what to do. And obviously, like I had referenced, I was doing like little things here and there to like make the money flow and like doing this virtual assistant work. But I did have to get help. Like I had to like kind of go back from myself and go back away from my pride and be like, okay, I need help. And literally I had people sending me money. Like it wasn't like some GoFundMe or anything. I literally just had people in my community helping me out. And from there, I was able to, like I said, make what I call the adult decision or the smarter decision of just saying, okay, fuck it. We're going to have to go back to Chicago. And at that moment in time, I felt like a failure. It was like really hard to have to accept that. But I knew that this is the only way to make something actually move or actually get out of this scenario. So I learned a valuable lesson. I mean, like I said, it really taught me to trust my intuition. And now it's like I always go by that. Like every single decision I make is always in the moment. And that's where I like really can read into people's energy and be like, okay, does this feel like a good connection? Does this feel like a good, fun podcast interview to do? Or all these different things that we're going after in our lives. And when I got back to Chicago, I mean, it was still the same thing. I was sleeping on a yoga mat, got rejected from food stamps. I was basically just doing whatever possible to make money come in. I had to choose. I actually had an article on Medium back in the day about like, just do I do my laundry or do I buy a subway fare? Like, I didn't know what to do. And basically that's how it was. And I almost got evicted, but somehow, miracle, whatever you want to call it, I mean, I always was able to survive.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. And Also, thank you to your gut for for saying that this is a good decision to come on this podcast.
Yes.
So, I mean, listening to your story, a lot of people in the same situation, and I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people in that same situation, maybe not the exact details, but similar kind of scenarios. A lot of people would kind of just crumble and end up getting really depressed. Yet you kind of took it as a lesson, all your failures as a lesson, and built from there. So how do we take really hard times and failures and turn it around into a positive?
I mean, it's twofold, right? Because you have the in the moment. Like, I know there's people out there that are struggling, that are really going through their own stuff, and they might be falling on hard times. They might be at their wits' end, like whether it's financial or they're going through a breakup or something is happening, or maybe they got laid off. In the moment, it's really, really important to always still find gratitude. And people think it's crazy. And I don't even know how I managed to do this, but it's literally finding something super small to still be grateful for. And even in those moments when I was sleeping on the floor on a yoga mat, which sounds so crazy and like surviving on quinoa, I always joke my first book is going to be called Quinoa because I literally was living off quinoa because I still didn't want to eat crap from McDonald's. And long story short, I mean, even in that time, I still was able to find gratitude. I was able to fight back the tears and like fight back any anger I was feeling. And of course, it's important to feel your feelings and you don't want to like bypass them by any means, but you still want to find that little nugget. And for me, it was like, I'm super grateful right now that I actually have a roof over my head, that I have water, that I have people that actually give a damn about me and actually are willing to support me or check in and make sure I'm doing okay, and people that really do care. And the way that you see them as lessons, I think this is something that just kind of comes with the individual. I mean, honestly, the amount of failures or ups and downs that I've seen on my journey just from trying all these different things. I always say my 20s were like my trial and error years because I really was doing everything. And I think it's just part of getting to know who you are and getting to know what you really love. And that's really when you're able to kind of produce whatever you're going to do. If it's a podcast, if it's articles, if it's a book, if you're going to offer products or services. But seeing failures as lessons, I think it took me time to realize that, you know what, every single thing was a lesson. And of course, there's hindsight involved. But even when you're in it, like I said, I think it's really important for anyone out there that's going through a hard time. And trust me, I know what it's like. You still have to find gratitude. And I mean, it sounds impossible. It sounds really hard, but it's the only way to get through it. And then, like I said, make sure that you have people in your life that understand what you're going through or that you can talk to about whatever you're going through.
Yeah. I think gratitude is huge. And you mentioned finding people to talk to. That is the beauty of like
online
Facebook groups and membership communities and all that kind of stuff. There's always people in the same sort of boat to help you through. So yeah, that's another thing to be grateful for.
It's the mindset too. Yeah. I mean, really, Brian, like you said, I mean, you really want to surround yourself. I always like to surround myself with people that are at my level or higher. And it's like that expression or that saying, like you're the 5 people you're around. And I really do feel that that's super important to consider, that you are who you're surrounded by. And that's why it's like, it's very hard too, for any of your listeners that are trying to like start their own like entrepreneurial endeavor, if they just feel like they're not happy in their lives, especially if you're coming out of college or if you're in the middle of your 20s and you're like, well, I don't know what to do in my lifestyle. I get it, because I had to literally let go of every single friend I ever had. I mean, some of them kind of just faded away because I was like going to bars and super excited about getting a Mind Body Green. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, we got to like really reevaluate who you're around and understand that it's important to be around the people that are also up to big things or that are kind of going down the same path as you. And this is not like an easy journey by any means. Like, it's a very lonely journey. And even to this day, people always think it's really weird, but I don't really have a social life. Like if you consider engaging on Facebook groups or talking to podcast hosts, like whatever I'm doing, that's my social life, is engaging with all these people. And it's like that's where all my friendships are. Most of my friends are people that I've met through Facebook groups.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how like you think working for yourself you're gonna have like, it's not more freedom, but things will be like so much better, and then
it's not freedom at all.
Yeah, you realize you get so much more like isolated.
Yeah. That's like something that people always assume, is that it's going to be this big freedom lifestyle. It's like, nope, it's not what you see on Instagram.
Yeah, I know in I think it was episode 19, I spoke to Jason Goldberg, and he was like, with entrepreneurship, you get to decide your own 70 hours to work every week.
Yeah, or 50 hours.
Yeah. Ashley, so I'm interested to hear, so learning from your failures was kind of a big lesson. What were kind of like 2 or 3 other lessons and hard truths that you learned in your 20s?
I think the hardest truth was just kind of, I would say, cutting out all these people. I mean, like I just said, is just kind of having all these certain friends in your life. And even for me, like I went through 2 different phases of this, and obviously I'm still cutting, or I'm still considering who's in my life that I shouldn't be hanging out with, or who's kind of more not at my level. And I don't mean that to sound mean or anything. It's just more of an energy match. But obviously when you're in your 20s, because I know in my early 20s it was all like, let's go to the clubs, let's go to the bar, and you kind of go through that phase in your life, or even just going on dates or whatever. For me, it only lasted like maybe a year, and then I kind of quickly got out of that because it was just not my scene. I was pretending like, oh yeah, this is fun, let's go hang out at a bar and get wasted all night.
Yeah.
But I think for people in their 20s, it's just so much about the friendships, and a lot of it for me was just very fake. And I always speak about authenticity and just kind of coming to the table as who you are. You really do need to find those people that you can be your whole self with. And I think over the years, even going back into childhood and high school, I always was trying, I had no problem fitting into any single clique. I would make friends left and right. I would put on every single mask to be liked or to have a lot of friends. But at the end of the day, when you go home, it's like, none of this feels real to me. I don't even know who I am. And people kind of use all these different friendships, or I know I was using friendships and dating and drugs and alcohol and all these different things to kind of avoid being by myself. And that was really a hard truth, is just kind of acknowledging who needs to be out of your life. And some of it's not easy. Even for me, like I said, I kind of went through the first phase of getting rid of a lot of the friends that weren't really entrepreneurs, or they didn't have the same drive as me, or the same amount of ambition, or they didn't have the big dreams. They were okay with kind of just doing the 9 to 5 and doing the regular life. But then I had to go through the phase after I kind of went through all my late 20s, when I was kind of in all these different entrepreneurial circles and all these different coaching things. I had to kind of really reevaluate and have some difficult conversations, even just with other entrepreneurial friends. Like I said, I mean, I've had so many different people in and out of my life, and I can probably count on my hand how many people I still actually connect with on a regular basis from the beginning, people that have actually been on the whole journey of Ashley, since 08, 09. And it's hard. It's not the easiest thing to have happen, of we all lose friends, or we all get out of relationships, but sometimes you have to take the power back and be like, okay, this is really not doing anything for me. And that's something I definitely learned, was being able to have those, I don't want to call them confrontational, but having those tough conversations where you do have to say, you know what, this friendship isn't working for me.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to jump in there, and I was gonna ask, how do you go about sort of severing these ties that maybe aren't taking you to where you want to be, and aren't serving you as much as you need from a friendship or a relationship? Is it a case of a, a bold confrontation, or is it like just gradually spending less time with the people until it kind of fizzles out? Or how do you suggest we go
I
about
think
things?
honestly, Brian, I think it kind of depends on the relationship itself, or the depth of how connected you guys have been. Because for me, I've had different people, like in terms of having a friendship that I've had through another entrepreneurial group or whatever, as opposed to like a childhood friend that just isn't at the same like place or time as me. And really it just comes down to like acknowledging yourself and be like, okay, is this relationship worth my happiness? Like, am I really going to put my dreams on hold? Am I really going to continue to go out with that person every single Friday night when I know exactly what it's going to be? It's going to be the same kind of bitch and moan thing. Now, I never like to be one of those people that does the whole slow fade thing.
Hmm.
It's more of like the dating thing where it's like the ghosting that people do all nowadays. But I think it's just more about having the actual conversation, as difficult as it might be. And that's where I just was saying it's like it was a lesson or something that I had to kind of build up over time, because I'm not the person that's going to go and get into a fight or get into an argument. But even if you do end up like being emotional in it, because I've had a couple of friends that have had like deep conversations about our entire relationship, and you do get emotional, but I feel like it's so much better once you actually have the conversation, like the heart to heart, even if it hurts, and you just have to kind of go into it knowing what you desire and just being very clear in your communication, like just saying, this is what is lacking in the relationship, or this is what's not working for me right now, and just kind of come to the table open-hearted and like kind of hear the person out or give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, obviously, in my early 20s, I definitely did the whole slow fade, like, oh, I'll just stop hanging out with them and they'll just kind of fizzle out, or they'll know that I don't really care, like I don't want to go out with them. But I think as I got towards my 30s, it's like you got to have the heart-to-heart conversation. You have to actually have that communication, even if it sucks, even if it's hard, even if you have to cry or yell through it. There's a lot to be said about actually just coming to the table and having that human moment.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like one of the biggest lessons you learned is to really feel what your body is saying with certain decisions, and tapping into your intuition or your gut feel or whatever you want to call it. And I'm traditionally like, I get into my head a lot, especially about making decisions. I tend to take a while. I think I'm getting better, but that's just who I am. And for people listening, how would you suggest listening to your gut and sort of recognizing that gut feeling in a tough situation?
Yeah, you're 100% right, because that's definitely something I've harnessed. Now, intuition to me is definitely a muscle that you do want to flex consistently, and then it gets stronger and stronger. But like you just said, so if you're thinking it's coming more from your head, it's this weird notion of kind of really going into your body. And it's like a slow progress, right? Because you have to really go through these different situations, even if it's just an email. Because people get really weird, like when they're like, oh, you can read right into that when you read the email. You literally read something, or you engage with someone, or you'll go out and have a drink with someone, and you just feel into them. And then you feel inside your gut, like your stomach or your body, like wherever it comes for you, it might hit you in the heart. You might feel something. You just like, you have to like ask yourself, how do I feel in this situation? How do I feel when I'm reading this email? How do I feel overall about this person right now? And from there, it's kind of like taking your head out of the equation. It's this really weird thing. And now it's like, I can do it in like 5 minutes. I can read something and know if I'm going to say yes or I'm going to say no. But it's really just kind of taking your head out of the equation, getting rid of your like overthinking mind, because I'm also like, I'm super analytical and I can like think about things. But now it's like, because I just connect so deeply to the vibrations, if you want to call them that, like that's what I really read into. It's like, how do I feel when I'm with this person? Do I feel good? Especially if you're going out with someone, or if you're at a networking event. Like, just notice how you feel with certain people and in certain environments, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. It's a big one for me, and something that I think a lot that goes with gut feel and being in your heart and not your head, if you want to put it that way, is is ruling out like the shoulds, like I should be doing this. And that's when your head kicks in and it's like, no, but
Yeah.
so I'm learning to recognize that a lot as well.
The shoulds are what get you.
Yeah.
And the shoulds and the woulds and the what ifs, like that's what kind of stops the momentum, or it does shut down the intuition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Ashley, I do want to get into sort of authenticity and vulnerability. One thing that maybe we can use this as kind of a segue into that is a big thing that I'm sure I'm pretty positive you would have noticed, and I can see as well from doing this podcast and engaging with people in this sort of generation, is the comparison trap, and like thinking that we're not where we should be, or we're not good enough, or we're not like other people. It's kind of like the Instagram effect. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how to sort of overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I always am speaking about, because people, like, that's one of the number one fears that people have. Like, am I good enough? Like, am I where I should be in my life? And honestly, the judgment, you have to realize that every single other person out there is having the exact same thoughts as you. I don't care how confident they look or how great they are. It's like everyone still has those like thoughts or that mind chatter that's kind of going through their head of, oh, I'm thinking that I'm not good enough. Like when you're walking down the street, everyone's always thinking, oh, people are looking at me weird, or people think I'm doing something weird. Like if you're vlogging in public or whatever. But they're not actually, they're thinking the exact same thing. And think about, just know that everyone else is going through the same thought process. And the comparison thing, like that's kind of real life, but the comparison thing really happens online. Like you just referenced with the Instagram effect, everyone's constantly scrolling through everything and constantly worried, like thinking about, oh, I'm not good enough, or this doesn't sound right, or I don't have the right lighting, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. But you have to realize that the only way to start something, the only way to actually build momentum, and I'm sure you know this with your podcast as well, you have to show up and be consistent, and you have to kind of get rid of that thought process of being good enough or worrying so much about how perfect it is. Because I think very directly related to comparison is perfection. And I think people get so caught up in waiting on things to actually be quote unquote perfect, when we all should know that perfection really doesn't exist. And kind of what I was saying earlier that I've really realized is my podcast, like it's doing well, but of course I could go down like a total spiral and be like, oh, well, it's not as good as this one, or it's not as good as that one. But I'm able to be super focused and know that I'm actually making a difference, even if it is just X amount of people. And that's really the only way. And like for Facebook or for social media, you just have to shut it down. Like every time I go on Facebook, I have an intention or I have a reason to be there. And most of the times it's just for business. Like I'm never just on there mindlessly scrolling. And there's like so many different ways to kind of help your mind, because there's actually a application through Google Chrome called Newsfeed Eradicator. I just told it to my friend. She's like, this political stuff is driving me crazy and I don't want to unfriend everyone. So I told her, we'll just put Newsfeed Eradicator up and then you don't even see your newsfeed. Or what I personally do is I literally just have all the apps on my phone. So I have the Facebook Groups app, I have the Facebook Mentions page. Like everything I'm doing is literally very much specific to what my actual reason or intention for being on there. And same thing for Instagram. I don't think there's like a newsfeed eradicator for Instagram, but you have to catch yourself. Why am I on here right now? Am I just mindlessly scrolling, or do I have an intention? Like, am I coming on here to share a post and engage with my tribe or engage with my audience, or am I coming here to like make myself feel like shit? Because if you want to feel like crap, you go and scroll.
Yeah.
And half of it's not even realistic either. And I guess that's kind of where the intuition, or where I always speak about like using empathy or that kind of thing to my advantage. And I always call my being an empath is my bullshit meter, because I can really kind of feel into the energy, or like I can read into people. Like if I feel like, oh, that's probably a desperate post because they're kind of jumping out being like, oh, I only have one spot left. I mean, obviously everything is very much different for the individual or the individual post, but a lot of what you see is just not the real deal. Like a lot of it is just fake, or a lot of like fake filters or people putting on airs, like acting like everything is all good and great, because obviously no one's going to put the unpolished or the unpretty moments of their life. And that's really what I'm here to do, or I hope I inspire people, or I show people like, look, I'm not perfect. Like, I don't have everything figured out. I'm just coming to the table as myself, and I'm sharing with you guys and I'm engaging with you guys, but I don't have everything figured out. And that's one thing I've done throughout my entire journey, is always share the ups and downs. Like, it wasn't easy to go on Facebook and be like, I'm leaving New York and I'm going back to Chicago because I'm broke and I don't know what's going to happen. But I know that people really do connect with that. Like, you have to come to the table 100% yourself, 100% vulnerable. And for some people, it might not be the case. It might not work for them, but people connect with people. Like, people connect with hearts. It's not like they're going to go on there and connect with like dollar bills or whatever.
Yeah, so a couple of things I want to mention from there. First, I'd love to see an Instagram account where it's like someone only sharing all their failures instead of all their like glorious, glamorous.
Right.
And then the other thing I wanted to mention was you mentioned going on Facebook and saying that you were going back home. Is there like something that just popped up for me in this conversation, kind of like from my gut, is there a line between, especially if we're doing it on social media, is there a line between like being vulnerable and authentic versus oversharing to try and get attention?
I think it depends. Like, it's your intention. For me, this is another question that always comes up, because a lot of people kind of go through the same thought process. Like, how do I separate my entrepreneurial public figure thought leader life with my personal life? For me, I don't have a line. Like, everything is so intertwined. And for me, it's like everything is business. Everything is work. I have a public figure page. Like, I choose to share everything. So I think it just comes down to what you feel comfortable with sharing, because everyone's different. Like, some people don't want to share their personal life or who they're married to or their kids or different things that might be their like more failures or hard times. But I choose to be more very open. I don't have a line when it comes to that. I tell everyone, like, you can ask me anything. I'm not going to shy away from it. And I just think that it's really the intention. So it's like, for oversharing, because I'm going to answer that. That's something I got a lot, like back in the day when I was sharing all the ups and downs, because that was like when I was going through that roller coaster. And I mean, life itself is a roller coaster. There's still going to be ups and downs, but I did get that a lot. Like, oh, you're really oversharing. And I'm like, fuck you. I don't care, because this is how I'm going to show up online. Like, if you don't like my page, you can leave. Like, I never felt like I was oversharing, even though some people might have thought that. Like, oh, how many times should you post on Facebook, or how many times should you post on Twitter or Instagram? It's just whatever feels good to you, like whatever feels quote unquote authentic to you, or your intention behind it matters. And that's where I was kind of saying that I can read into the energy of all these different things. Like, if someone is constantly posting about their crappy life, or they're constantly posting about their pretty life on a beach, you can read into that and you can feel into the person. Like, it really is the intention. And I know I keep harping this, but there is so much to be said about the intention behind the post or behind the email. And I've even had that experience where I remember I sent out an email, like, just kind of saying no thanks to some weird opportunity. And I went into it, I'm like, I'm not quite sure. I should probably say yes, but maybe I should say no. I kind of went into it a little bit more shaky, and I'm like, I'm just going to say no. And then I, of course, never heard back. I'm like, well, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to hear back from a no because I'm turning them down. But then I did the same thing in a different energy. Like, my intention was, this isn't the right opportunity for me, but oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that you actually wanted to connect with me and that you reached out, and just went into it with more of that, like, kind of like, no, this isn't going to happen, but also being able to kind of come into it with like a lot of love and heart, like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, but this is a no for me. And sure enough, even though I turned them down, they sent me a message back like within 10 minutes saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, I had no idea you'd respond. I'm so sorry it's not going to work out at this time, but definitely let's stay in touch. So just like those little things, like when you go into different things, whether it's a Facebook post or you're reaching out or pitching, you have a different effect when your intention is different.
Cool. So it all comes back to the gut feel.
Yeah, it does. Like it all comes back to the gut feel.
Cool. So, excuse me, Ashley, how then do we start showing up or tapping into who it is we really are and showing up more raw and real and vulnerable?
I think honestly, it's just letting go of the perfection. It's letting go of the judgment, which we kind of just, you have to get away from the comparison and just kind of come to the table. Like whoever you would be if no one was watching you, like what are you doing when no one's watching you? And that's how I show up. Like I'll be on my podcast or I'll be on a Facebook Live and I sing to myself. I do weird things. I talk to myself all day. It's like I do this weird shit. And even back in the day, this is funny because I was slowly kind of coming to my own, like I was slowly kind of becoming more aware of who I am. I actually had a YouTube channel like back in the day where I was literally just dancing to like Jay-Z, and my friend was laughing at me. She was like, "You're gonna post that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't give a shit. Like I'll just post this." And then literally like in a couple hours it was like 150 views, and this was like back when YouTube was first starting or whatever. But it was just so comical that I did that, and it's like I don't know what it is. Like, I think it just takes time to get to know yourself. And that's kind of where I see my 20s. Like, never think that you're going to get to know yourself like in a weekend. Like, there's all these like ideas or thoughts or summits where it's like, oh, get to know yourself over a weekend. Yeah, you're probably going to start to peel back some layers because there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of like content or whatever that you can go out and like kind of have that heart to heart with yourself. I mean, are we both ENFJs?
Yeah.
I mean, you can go out and like find these different like little things you can kind of like tap into. Oh, I'm an ENFJ. That makes sense. Or you can go out and get these different personality things or have people ask you like hard questions about who you are and what your purpose is and what your passion is. But I think it's an over the time type of thing. And in order to kind of show up online as authentic or as vulnerable and kind of raw how I do, it's really just not giving a fuck about what people think of you.
Cool.
And letting go of the judgment piece. Like, I don't care what people think of me. Obviously, I want people to enjoy my material. I want people to listen to my podcast. I hope people get wisdom from it. I hope people come and connect with me. I want nothing more than, I always say that my bigger mission is like, I always want to leave people better than I find them, even if it's just like I make them think or I make them smile or I make them laugh, whatever it is. I always want to leave that impact or leave that effect, but I also know very well after many years of trial and error that I'm not for everyone. And I guess I've finally come to that place where it's like, I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that distinction or that clarification. I mean, there's 7 billion people on the planet. They're not all going to like you.
Yeah, and that's so much space online. I mean, that's why we can have 1,000 different podcasts. I mean, there's more than 1,000, but that's why we can have all these different things out in the world, because for one person, I might not be their cup of tea, but they can go and join Amanda's Facebook group, or they can go and join so-and-so's Facebook group. Like, there's so many awesome people out there, and there can also be crossover. We can collaborate, we can connect and engage, and it's just letting go of that idea that you're constantly, I guess, trying to beat everyone else or thinking that everyone's out to get you.
Yeah, I love it. Ashley, I do want to be mindful of the time. I see we've racked up some minutes here.
Like this conversation though.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably carry on speaking for hours, but I do want to get to some rapid fire questions at the end here. So just the first thing that comes to mind or to your gut. And like a sentence or two. So the first one is, what do you wish you'd been told in your 20s?
I wish I would have been told that it's all going to work out. It's all going to be okay. Like, you can trial and error as much as you like. It's all going to work out eventually. And that's part of the journey. That's part of the process.
Cool. What is the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers or 20-somethings today?
Greatest opportunity is getting online. I mean, I don't know why you're not online at this point, but there's so much online space that you can really tap into and connect, even for the ones that aren't necessarily entrepreneurial minded. I mean, there's so many places you can engage and connect. I'm thinking out loud of just like people that might feel different, or they might be the black sheep, or they might feel out of place in their like school or wherever. Get online. There's so many awesome people.
Yeah, and that's something I been hearing from more and more guests. So it's cool that you mentioned that. This next one's a little bit of a meta question. So what would I need to ask you for this to be the most important thing for 20-somethings to hear? And how would you answer that?
Ooh. What would I have you ask me? I think it's almost like a piggyback of what you just asked, which is like, what is the one or two things that I wish I had known in my 20s? I mean, I think that's such a great question that it just I could obviously expand and like probably write a book on it, but I think there's so many things like when you come out of your 20s and you kind of get into your 30s, like I'm 31 just for reference, you kind of look back at your 20s and you're like, I was worried about all that, or
Yeah.
like, oh, that was nothing. Like in that moment, like that breakup or that friendship fight or that situation with that bad client, like all that stuff, it's so like small scale in terms of like all the opportunity. And even today, it's like I'm still constantly thinking, oh my God, I should be doing more. I need to be doing more. And then I have to remind myself, you got so many years. Like hopefully you'll live until you're 150. Like there's so many years ahead. So I think that would be the question. I could, like I said, I could write a book on that.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it was Tony Robbins. He said, one day you'll laugh at how small your problems really were. So why not laugh right now? Cool.
Yeah. So many first world problems. I mean, think about like the hashtag first world problems. I mean, some of it was like more serious than just like, oh, they fucked up my coffee order. But I mean, a lot of it is just so small scale in the big scheme of things.
Yeah. Ashley, I've got one more question, but before we get to that, what's the best way for people to connect with you and find out more about Real Talk and all the other good stuff that you've got going on?
Yeah, the best way is just by going to either of my websites. I have my ashleytayloryannello.com, which is kind of my main place where I've got articles and everything like speaking in press, and it links out to my podcast, it links out to my courses and my Facebook community. And then podcast Real Talk with Ashley, you can look it up on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and the website's High Vibe Like What, and I'm basically A Taylor Y across social.
Yeah, and we'll link up all of that at the show notes, which I will put in the outro because I'm not sure what the number's going to be right now, but we'll find that at the show notes. So Ashley, I do have one more question, but before I get into that, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you today for coming on and sharing your up and down roller coaster story through your 20s. And I think the biggest thing was, not crumbling or letting your failures define you, but using those as a lesson and now helping others with the same sort of things through your daily podcast, which I highly recommend people go check out. So I want to acknowledge you for that. And the final question I do have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
There's so many things you guys could do. I feel like the number one thing is just try different things. Like whatever you're interested in, if it's like you want to start writing, start and write. Like medium.com is a great website that because it reaches it could reach a lot of people because it's an open platform. And then if you want to do a podcast, do a podcast. I started mine without a plan. Like you don't have to be all fancy with it. Like I literally started mine on my iPhone. So I think the number one thing you guys can do this week is really just like kind of dive in, like what is missing in your life, what's something that excites you. Like it can be the silliest thing, like just start doing something and try it out. Like the worst that happens is you fail, you learn, and then you pivot. I mean, that's the biggest thing I've learned from my life and from my 20s is just it's all going to work out. It's just a lot of pivoting and learning and never letting it stop you. I mean, if I'd listened to a lot of people, I probably would have given up a long time ago, but I'm a fighter and I'm not going to give up. So just never, ever think that one failure or one hater or one negative comment or one person that doubts you, don't let that stop you.
Boom. Ashley Taylor Yannello, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you so much, Brian.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. A little longer than usual, but such a good time hanging up with Ashley Taylor Yannello. And thanks once again to Ashley for coming and spending some time with us on the Quarter Life Comeback. If you like this one, share it around with your friends and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know what your biggest takeaway was. For me, it's got to be the fact that we don't have to have everything figured out right now. And this is something I keep hearing from more guests on the show. So don't worry if you don't have things perfect or figured out at this stage. Just take that next step and keep moving forward. Now, as always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned at briantier.com/039. And if you like this episode and want to get more updates like it, head on over to quarterlifecomeback.com and fill in the form on that page. Thanks so much for spending time with me again this week. And until next time, keep creating your Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.